evening, dear Medyascope viewers. Welcome to This Week in Turkey. This evening, aerospace and defense policies and technologies expert Arda Mevlütoğlu will be joining us to speak about the sanctions imposed on Turkey by the USA over the purchase of Russian S-400 missile defense system. The Trump administration imposed the sanctions within the scope of the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, the CAATSA Act. As the Turkish president considered the move to be disrespectful, sanctions created a turmoil in Turkey's political agenda.
The sanctions imposed by the U.S. Treasury Department target Turkey's Defense Industry Presidency, SSB. It imposes full blocking sanctions and visa restrictions on the president of the SSB, İsmail Demir, SSB Vice President Faruk Yiğit, Head of the Department of Air Defense and Space, Serhat Gencoğlu, and Program Manager for SSB's Regional Air Defense Systems Directorate, Mustafa Alper Deniz. The sanctions law was signed by Donald Trump in 2017, and it mandates the president to choose 5 out of a range of 12 sanctions. Turkey is the first NATO member to be imposed such sanctions. The formal reason behind U.S. sanctions on Turkey, reported by the U.S. Department of State's official website, is stated as for knowingly engaging in a significant transaction with Russia's main arms export entity by procuring the S-400 surface-to-air missile system. In accordance, U.S. officials claim that the S-400s would be incompatible with NATO systems and thus would expose the next-generation F-35 jets vulnerable to an attack by Russia. Professor Dr. İlhan Uzgel has more on Turkey's decision to continue with S-400s. Purchasing S-400 missiles is a major strategic mistake that Turkey had made. There isn't anything urgent for the time being, and to give up on F-35 jets for this is a great carelessness. F-35s are active systems. That means you can use them in the Aegean Sea, in northern Iraq, even in Libya with tanker aircrafts. But the S-400s, on the other hand, you are going to put them somewhere and they're going to wait. In any case, Turkey is not in need of an urgent system in the near future. When you need it, you ask for it, and it arrives. We've experienced this 3 times in the past with NATO. As the foreign policy reflects on the domestic policy, the way the opposition party leaders stood behind Erdogan and abstained from criticizing his actions infuriated those who viewed the purchase of Russian missiles as a mistake. Political scientist and historian Professor Dr. Nuray Mert gave her insights on the attitude adopted by the opposition regarding Turkey's foreign policy to Medyascope.
Foreign policy is a subject open for debate. We are not obliged to defend every decision that our government makes as for national interest. There needs to be an opposition present who can speak up about this. But if we cannot speak up, and if your worldview on certain subjects are the same view of the current regime that you criticize, then the problem that you have with the regime becomes the problem you have with the people.
Good evening, Mr. Mevlütoğlu. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, merhabalar.
So the threat of U.S. sanctions over Turkey's purchase of Russian S-400 defense system have long been talked about, and it has finally happened this week. 5 out of the 12 sanctions listed have been approved by the Trump administration. So what was your initial reaction to the news? Did the green light on sanctions and its scope surprise you?
Not at all. I have been expecting this for more than 2 years. But the surprise came on the exact day of the sanctions. I was expecting it to take place on Friday, right after the Senate voting on the National Defense Authorization Act. I was expecting it to take place on Friday, actually. But the real surprise for me was the announcement on Monday. On the other hand, yes, it was not surprise at all for me all along, for a variety of reasons. One of them has been very strong statements by top Turkish leaders, such as presidents, such as spokesperson for the presidency, Minister of Foreign Affairs. All these top figures have made very strong remarks about the purchase of the S-400, about the motivations of Turkish government on the selection of this decision, which combined have made it as a statement of Turkey as a choice, not solely restricted to military technical terms, but as a statement of a policy. not in terms of Turkey's change of direction to Russian Federation, but it was a political decision. And from the level of those statements, I had the impression that Turkey will not back down. Coming to the U.S. government side, U.S. government has made it more or less clear that if Turkey receives or activates or whatever it is, the S-400 system, the CAATSA sanctions will be imposed. And we have an example here. We have the Chinese case in which China in 2018 purchased the S-400, took delivery of the S-400, and right after the delivery of the system, U.S. government imposed CAATSA sanctions on the government institution that made the purchase and the head of that institution. So we had an example. Yes, China is not a NATO ally. Yes, China is not part of the Western system, but the U.S. bureaucracy or U.S. government had a mechanism, and from the statement we saw that U.S. government was determined to execute that mechanism if negotiations fail or if Turkey does not back down. And coming again to Turkish side, for all the tone and level of those remarks, we saw that Turkish government has never thought of backing down on the S-400 case, which brought us to Monday with the imposition of the CAATSA sanctions.
Mm-hmm. So Turkey didn't want to back down, yet it was aware that acquiring the S-400 missile defense system might lead to potential consequences and surely activating it as well. So just to have some background information here, why did Turkey buy the S-400s from Russia to begin with? Was it a wise choice for Turkey's defense as opposed to going with the Patriot system, for example? In your opinion, which defense system would have been more logical for Turkey?
Very complicated question because it doesn't have an easy answer. The requirement for Turkey to have a long-range, high-altitude air defense system goes back to early 90s, where the threat of weapons of mass destructions and long-range ballistic missiles and the possession of countries such as Iraq, Iran, Syria posed a significant security threat to Turkey. And the level of that threat was very evident in the first Gulf War, in which Saddam Hussein fired ballistic missiles to Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey was defenseless. And back in time, Turkey did not have adequate financial resources to invest in such a complicated and expensive system. The level of technology was not mature enough, and due to a variety of reasons, some of them coming from bureaucracy, some of them coming from the difficulty of defining requirements, Turkey was not successful in getting a system to fulfill the needs of long-range air defense. And as interim gap filler solutions, Turkey from time to time increased crisis periods, took some assistance from NATO in terms of deployments from United States, Netherlands, Germany, and but the requirement stayed there. And in early 2000s, Turkey opened several projects to fulfill that requirements, from local development, from off-the-shelf solutions. And in 2013, we saw the Chinese case. Turkey selected the Chinese system, which created significant backlash from NATO, from United States. And in 2015, the tender was cancelled. And the next year, right after the coup attempt on July 15th, we saw the negotiations starting with Russian Federation. So that's a brief history. And in that history, we saw that we see that Turkey had some difficulties in defining requirements and fulfilling them. There are a number of air defense systems going on in Turkey right now, and those are local development projects. But for such a sophisticated system that needs to work in conjunction with existing systems, such as early warning radars, communications equipment, you have to have a system that is compatible, that is interoperable with those systems, a networkable system. Yes, S-400 by far is the most sophisticated and the most capable air defense system in the world, capable of working with different types of missiles, with different ranges, very long range missiles. It has very strong radars. So all in all, it's the most sophisticated and advanced air defense system in the world. But for such a system to be capable of working efficiently, you have to connect it to an existing early warning and command and control network, which Russian system is incapable of. And by looking at the statements from Turkish officials, such as Minister of Defense Hulusi Akar, Turkey intends to use this S-400 as in a standalone mode without connecting it to existing networks, which will significantly hamper its ability to work very efficiently. So what would be the wisest choice? Personally, if you ask me, I would rather concentrate all Turkey's efforts and resources to local development projects, which are in a very advanced stage. The Hisar family of air defense systems are almost completed. They are shorter range missiles, but their longer range versions are on the table, are on the development phase. So I would divert sources to local development projects, and to fulfill the gap, I would rather select systems compatible with Turkey's existing network and air defense systems. Not necessarily Patriot, maybe. There was also the European option, but apparently, I think as a result of very complicated political, technological, economic, financial reasons, Turkey went the Russian way. Okay, we have the system now, it's operational. Then we should concentrate on working to the full use of that system. I think that's the only way possible right now.
Mr. Mevlütoğlu, coming back to the sanctions now, many of them are against individuals, but not only against individuals. There are also sanctions that have been imposed towards Turkey's presidency of defense industries as well. Will Turkey's business in this field be impacted by the sanctions? Can defense import-export continue via canals outside of the presidency of defense industries?
There will be some impact for sure. That is inevitable. But the level of it, the level of the impact is questionable. In the short term, I expect some damage, so to say, to happen to defense business in two main categories. One could be some impact, negative impact on the exports. Not necessarily directly linked with the CAATSA sanctions, but also because some countries or some firms may be reluctant to do business or to be seen in doing business with SSP or with Turkish companies. So CAATSA and the particular sanctions are not necessarily the extreme harsh sanctions from the 12th sanction menu. However, at the end of the day, SSP is let's say, contaminated with a sanction, and those sanctions are related with doing business, significant defense business with Russian Federation, which is a big red flag for NATO countries, other NATO countries. That might create a risk, especially in the short term. That was the first aspect. The second aspect is that Turkish defense industry is running a huge number of development and production projects, and in many of those projects, US produced technologies, subsystems, parts, components are used. In order for those projects to go, and in order for those parts and technologies to flow into the country, SSP needs export licenses, because SSP is the main procurement authority for Turkish defense projects. Until an alternative solution or alternative channel is found, there might be some impact. And I believe there might be some alternatives, such as procurement through Ministry of National Defense, which is not subject to sanctions. That might be an option. And I think the feasibility of those options is linked to the diplomatic negotiations or diplomatic relations between the United States and Turkey. Because if Turkey finds an alternative solution to seamlessly continuing projects, United States government or Congress might be reluctant to give a green light. In order for those alternatives to work, we need to follow the course of negotiations, diplomatic relations with Turkey and United States government. And we have a factor here. In January, the new United States government will take office. Biden will assume office. So if Turkey manages to start a new chapter with the United States, there might be new options that we don't see right now. It is full of open questions and question marks.
Is it significant that these sanctions have been imposed for the first time on a NATO ally?
Yes, yes, that is so far we have two CAATSA cases, one in China and the other one is Turkey, but those two countries are very different, have very different states. Now, China is not a NATO member, is not part of Western alliance. On the other hand, Turkey is one of the oldest NATO allies, one of the most has one of the strongest armies in NATO. Participates in a lot of NATO operations. It's a very effective NATO member. So that is a huge example. That might also be a signal to other countries that are willing or on the phase of doing business with Russia. Those countries which also have good relations with the United States. There is a possibility that this sanction might create an interesting domino effect in terms of United States relations with other countries that are members of NATO and also other non-NATO member US allied countries such as maybe India, such as Saudi Arabia. Those countries are also interested in getting Russian weapon systems, sophisticated systems, including S-400. We should follow the reaction from those governments, from those countries, and there might be interesting consequences of Turkey's CAATSA example.
Mm-hmm. And lastly, Mr. Mevlütoğlu, I mean, you did say, obviously, in January with the Biden administration taking office, there are lots of open-ended questions, but in what situation would you expect further sanctions to be put in place? Is it possible that the 7 other articles of the CAATSA sanctions might be activated against Turkey? And will the sanctions just automatically be lifted if Turkey gets rid of the S-400s or decides just not to activate them and use them actively?
Starting from your last question, that is a big unknown for me also, because yes, S-400 activation or delivery triggered the CAATSA sanctions, but it is not fully unclear, at least to me, if Turkey just puts S-400 into a box and withdraws it, CAATSA sanctions will automatically be lifted. That is a big question also for me. For the Biden administration imposing further sanctions, that is a risk, and that risk is not minimal. I see such a possibility, but that possibility is directly linked to the course of bilateral negotiations, and also if Turkey makes further steps, such as making a stance against the United States and deepens defense relations with Russia. Maybe just purchases additional systems from Russia, or establishing defense industry cooperation, companies from both sides doing more business, then Biden administration imposing further sanctions will definitely take place, I guess.
Arda Mevlütoğlu, thank you so much for having joined us today.
Thank you for having me.
YouTube announced on December 16th that it will appoint a local representative to Turkey, as required by the new Turkish law on social media regulation.
Following a series of fines issued by the Turkish government, the online video sharing platform YouTube has decided to abide by the new Turkish law and will appoint a representative to Turkey. YouTube expressed that they have been thoroughly analyzing the newly amended social media law prior to making the decision. The law requires for social media platforms to appoint local representatives to comply with removal requests and publish semi-annual reports on transparency. The company's official statement regarding the sudden decision states that, as we preserve our loyalty to the pillars of transparency, freedom of speech, and data access, we're also attentive to follow the local rules and restrictions of the countries we operate in. Acknowledging the importance of Turkish content creators, YouTube noted that they are aware of how significant YouTube is for users and creators in Turkey, and that the company is also tracking the unique polyphonic world that the thousands of users create each day. Before the company's decision to appoint a representative, YouTube had already been notified, along with other social media platforms, of the 5-stage penalties for those who fail to comply with the rules. In early December, YouTube, along with Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, were each fined 30 million Turkish liras for failing to appoint a local representative to Turkey. Regarding YouTube's sudden tangent on complying to the new Turkish law, cyber rights activist and academic Yaman Akdeniz tweeted the following while sharing YouTube's official statement. What a shame. YouTube just announced that the platform will obey the legal requirements of the Turkish authorities and establish an office and have legal representation in Turkey. Really good luck with that. While YouTube decided to make peace with the Turkish government before being exposed to further penalties, Facebook has announced their rejection to appoint a representative in early October. Other social media giants are yet to make any statements.
And now for the coronavirus-related developments of the week. According to the latest figures on the novel coronavirus announced by the Ministry of Health, the daily number of new cases is 27,515, and the number of patients has been announced as 4,209 as of December 17th. 243 people have lost their lives due to the virus in the last 24 hours. The number of tests conducted in the last 24 hours has been announced as 206,102. President Erdogan announced a 4-day lockdown starting on New Year's Eve in order to curb the spread of the virus through possible New Year celebrations. The 4-day New Year's curfew will start at 9 a.m. on December 31st and will end at 5 a.m. on January 4. That's all from This Week in Turkey. See you next Friday at 9 p.m. Good night.